I am strength and endurance world record holder James Pieratt. Next month I am planning to run 500 miles from California to Washington, self-supported purely by trail. Last fall I ran for 33 hours without stopping once, carrying a 35-pound pack and covering over 115 miles, and in doing so I broke a couple world records, including the longest weighted run with more than 30 pounds by distance, and I almost doubled the existing record, as well as the longest non-stop weighted run at 33 hours and change. It was a good experience. I tend to really enjoy stuff like that. In the course of that one, I fractured both of my feet and tore my right meniscus, yet still, at the end of it, I was left wanting something. I knew that I hadn't reached my mental and physical limits. Upon completing the event, I immediately tested positive for COVID. So not only did I break multiple world running records, but I broke them while positive for COVID. Despite all that, I knew I had a lot more to give. I was really just kind of starting to see that I had underestimated myself. Despite all the ultramarathons and endurance events and life obstacles that I've overcome, I was starting to realize that maybe I was capable of more than I had suspected before. Before I could make any plans for a follow-up event, my dad, who is an old mountain man and bear hunter, he fell off a cliff. Somehow he survived. He broke almost everything in his whole body, and they got him out by helicopter and took him to a hospital, and I think within like a day or two he checked himself out and went home. A little while later it became clear that he wasn't going to make a full physical recovery and probably wasn't going to be able to hunt and run around the mountains and do all the things that he loved doing. And so he shot himself. And so the winter, my winter was, following the world record event in the fall. That following winter was full of grief as I mourned him and kind of retreated within myself. As some time passed and I began to think about it and process it and kind of understand his decision and honestly in certain ways respect it, I started to kind of realize that something in me had changed. I came out of that winter feeling just different. I'd left some parts of me behind and maybe discovered some new ones. I immediately started considering the biggest challenge I could think of, something that would not just challenge me, but scare me a little bit. That was something I hadn't felt in a long time. I was kind of looking forward to that. Ultimately, that led to a 500-mile trail run between California and Washington. I've decided that I want to do it self-supported, so I will collect and purify my own water along the way. I will live off MREs and freeze-dried food out of an ultralight pack on my back, and I will just stay constantly moving. And I'll take quick stops at night to repair gear, switch out socks, do whatever I got to do, refill water, purify water, and eat, and then I'll keep moving. So it's not a traditional ultramarathon in the sense that you're going to have a lot of checkpoints and oversight. You're not going to have a support team. It's just going to be me out on the trail alone for 10, 14 days, a couple weeks most likely is what it'll take to chip away at that. I'm mostly, fear aside, looking forward to it. That sense of freedom is always what's drawn me to ultramarathons. I've never really taken the approach of, say, like a David Goggins or someone. I never actually found them to be that difficult. The pain of fracturing your feet or tearing your knee apart or doing whatever is pain, but losing loved ones and not being able to save them or living a life without hope, those are the things that truly hurt. So having experienced those things, I think it gives me some perspective on physical pain, and particularly in endurance events and tests of the will like this. I now find that they mostly bring me a sense of peace and freedom. It doesn't trigger the savagery in me. Occasionally that's going to happen on its own because you're going to come against obstacles that you just have to blast through. But for the most part, it's a sense of peace and serenity that it brings me. So I'm looking forward to being alone and living in that world, as long as it takes to get the job done. And in doing so, being closer to my dad, because the best memories that, we had together were hunting bear and running around the mountains together. It's something I'm really looking forward to. My training for this is more intense than it's ever been in my life. I'm currently in the best shape that I have ever been in. My resting heart rate is in the 30s. I'm running anywhere between 3 and 5 ultramarathons every single week, ranging from 40 to 50 miles per. I'm still lifting weights 2 to 3 days per week, occasionally fitting in some wrestling or jiu-jitsu. I'm being religious with the deployment of all my prehabilitation and joint maintenance exercises. All of this really comes into balance, a symbiotic balance of all those training pieces, because it's true that it takes a while to build the capacities to do and balance all those things. But really, it's just, even no matter how fit you are, if you want to do all that stuff, you have to balance it together in an intelligent way, and ideally a symbiotic way where these different training methodologies feed off each other. What was that, a couple years ago now? I had a project where I deadlifted, if you remember, 520 pounds and ran 50 miles in one day. In order to achieve that, there really wasn't like any training programs or protocols in existence designed to do that. So I kind of had to make my own. It has now since become very popular online, and it might be the most popular hybrid athlete training program in existence, but it's called the Atlas Blueprint. It is the same basic training outline that I use to break the world record, the world weighted running record, and it is the same one that I used to build my base for this 500-mile project that we're working on right now. I've found that in terms of balancing everything and fitting all the pieces together, you have to be very precise, and it's not an easy puzzle to solve. So I tend to always look to the Atlas Blueprint first, even in my own training. I ended up making it available to other people because so many people wanted to understand. They were just curious, mostly, I think, curious on how someone like me trains, and what we call the full spectrum training style. So it would be like, if you think of like the hybrid athlete training style as training strength and endurance, like the full spectrum style would be strength, endurance, athleticism, hand-to-hand combat skills, any relevant weapon skills for military or law enforcement, joint integrity and mobility, overall durability, physique too, because not only does a good physique make you look good, but a good physique provides armor, throughout all, from impact with other people, with objects, from impacts with the earth, which I'm clearly not built like your average ultramarathon runner, but the extra muscle mass that I carry definitely provides armor and protection. I mean, if you're going to kick the earth 1,000,000 times, that impact, even if each one is as small as a step, is going to take a toll on your body. I use the Atlas Blueprint as my base for this. However, given the extreme demands on my energy systems and the fact that most of this event is going to take place at above 6,000 or 7,000 feet of elevation, through mountains, forest, and high desert, I really needed something. I needed to find a way to really boost my energy systems, like just the basic aerobic, anaerobic, and what we call the phosphorus or creatine phosphate system. And so I just wrote a program for myself. It's not for sale, we haven't released it or anything like that, but I wrote a program for myself that is designed to build all of those energy systems to very, very, very high capacities. Through experimenting on myself, or utilizing myself and experimenting on other athletes of mine, we've seen that for whatever reason, we just call it the Appalachia program, but we see that Appalachia, it works across the full spectrum, but it works particularly well for some reason with beginners and experts. So people at either end of the spectrum seem to benefit the most from it. Everyone through the full spectrum will benefit from it, obviously. You can't build super robust energy systems and work capacity and not see benefit. But for whatever reason, that seems to increase at either end of the spectrum. In short, you ask about my training, it's a combination of, the good old Atlas blueprint and then Appalachia. And I am currently in the best shape of my life. Yesterday I ran just over 40 miles, and in the course of which I burned 8,177 calories according to my personal biometrics. That is a lot of food, and not an amount of food that you're going to eat, especially on the run. If you're running all day, there's no way you're going to have time to sit down and have 3 or 4 or 5 large grand traditional meals. So on run days like that particularly, I, in the morning, start out with a fruit smoothie with lots of usually 2 scoops of whey protein, a little bit of spinach, and a bunch of berries and guava juice generally is kind of my basic recipe. And then I will have some form of either a cup of like oats with a lot of nuts and honey and raisins and stuff in it, or even like a good sourdough muffin just with a bunch of either peanut butter, Nutella, and honey, just really calorie dense stuff. And I'll have that pretty much first thing in the morning, as well as a coffee with butter blended up in it, which is just something I generally do anyway. And then throughout the day, I am constantly eating. So the secret when it comes to eating during ultramarathons is just small bites, small sips constantly. You'll see all sorts of formulas out there including myself, I've put out several myself, but formulas for calories and fluid intake per hour, and those are all based on science and very good guides. Most of them are highly accurate when adjusted for body mass. The thing is, at the end of the day, the answer is the same. It's how much can you get in? How much fluid can you take in? How much food can you take in? How much can your gut process? Some of that's training, like you get better at digesting on the move for sure. But a lot of it is just strategy, because these things, like once you get behind on your hydration, there's really no catching up. Like if your electrolytes get out of balance or you're not getting enough water, whatever it is, like it's really hard to catch up while still working. I tend to prefer the whole foods myself to the products. There are some decent products out there. Scratch and Tailwind both have like really good products that have multi-carb sources as well as electrolytes and a little bit of protein, which is a very good recipe to drink while you're on the run. You can replace the carbs, replace the electrolytes, and get some protein in there to help with the muscle breakdown that's going to happen inevitably at that sort of extreme distance, and repeated efforts. But I tend to prefer whole foods when possible. They make little baby food pouches that you can fill up with whatever you want. I like a mix of peanut butter and agave syrup and raisins, and just so peanut butter, agave syrup, and raisins all mixed up, and you can just kind of squeeze it in your mouth, and it's calorie dense fat and protein. You can also mix a little bit of like vanilla whey protein in there, just kind of heat it up, mix it in, and pour it into your little containers. And so that's a very useful strategy. I also really like Mexican dried pineapples that are covered in salt and tahini, like the salt and spices. Pineapple is good, obviously a good carb source, but it also aids in digestion. So it can help with all the stuff you're putting in your stomach, and it aids with inflammation. Obviously you're going to be experiencing a lot of inflammation and a longer endurance event like this. But the truth is, you need to have a good variety, because you're going to get really tired of eating the same. There's a name for it, it's called flavor fatigue, but it's like salty, sweet. If you can alternate between those two and have a couple options of each for some variety, it's really going to help you out in getting those calories, because once you stop eating too, it gets harder and harder to get calories into your stomach. And at the end of the day, nothing's better than a good steak, beef, bison, or bear, and veggies. Always like, just good old country beans. Nothing crazy there, maybe some potatoes, and then every night I have some sort of dessert. I like the ice cream, I like ice cream, I like baked goods and stuff. I generally avoid the gluten, but there's some really good like gluten-free brownies and pastries and cookies and stuff out there that I actually have a gluten-free bakery right down the street, so I'm pretty spoiled in that regard. But that's pretty much what a normal day for me looks like. If it's a weight training day or a day when I'm not doing like a longer run, I won't eat as much. But even still, I generally only eat the 2 meals per day, because I'm always on the move in one way or another. So a lot of snacking, a lot of shakes, and a lot of fruit smoothies to get the carbs and protein in, But I keep it pretty simple overall. Well, that'll wrap it up for episode 1. Be sure to follow along for episode 2, where we do a day in the life of, and you guys can follow me through my whole day, training, eating, everything from morning to evening.